Right, that should be recording now.
We're all set to go. Hi everyone, welcome to another webinar from us. It's the first that we're doing this year from I Want to Be a Dentist. And today we've got an excellent panel of dental students and people who play various roles in the whole platform that we have. So today's webinar is all about the UCAT and everything that you need to know to get started. I have a lovely panel and fellow colleagues here at Want to Be a Dentist. So Alina and Omar, do you just want to go ahead and introduce yourself first, just to begin with?
Yeah, hi guys, I'm Alina and I'm a third year dentist at the Uni of Leeds.
Hi guys, I'm Omar. I'm a first year dental student at King's College London.
Great, and Omar and Alina both are co-directors and they've worked very hard on the resources that we're going to show you today, and hopefully you find this webinar very useful. We will have a whole section on Q&A as well, and you can always use the chat function here to message in the group and we'll reply to you as soon as we can. And if there's any other questions you have along the way, put them in the chat and I'm sure Alina, myself and Omar will get to them in due course. Yeah, so like I said, today's webinar is all about the UCAT and everything you need to know to help you succeed in the UCAT. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask us or message us at any time. And now, just to begin with, if we just go on to the next slide, we've got a little giveaway for you guys. And this right here is your chance to win a copy of our free book, which we're going to release very shortly. It's a 2022 edition. And all you have to do to enter the giveaway is take an image of the screen and just tag us in our store on your Instagram story. Can I just have the previous slide, Alina?
I don't know why.
No worries. Just take a picture of this screen here, tag us on Instagram, and we'll enter you in the giveaway to win a free copy. The winner will actually be announced tomorrow, which is very good. And we'll DM you directly with your own copy of your book. We've got quite a lot of questions coming in already. Yes, this webinar will be recorded. So yeah, if you guys want to just take a moment to take a picture of the screen, just tag us on I Want to Be a Dentist and we'll enter you on our giveaway. And you can maybe win a copy of our book, which has amazing resources. A lot of dental students have contributed to this and written amazing things about the whole application process. And it actually does create have a section on the UCAT itself, which you guys can utilize. So I'll give you guys like a minute to do that. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to ask us in the chat. Okay, so hopefully you guys managed to take a picture of that. But if not, just tag us on our story about the webinar and we'll accept that. That's not a problem. So we have a lot of free resources here at I Want to Be a Dentist. If you've had a chance to check out our website, you know that we provide one of the best resources for dental applicants. Now, this QR code here will take you to a free UCAT online trial of our online course. And it will give you like a little taste of what you can expect if you do decide to go ahead and join our UCAT crash course. It contains multiple videos and presentations with voiceovers and annotations, which have been developed by our top ranking tutors to help give you the best resources to prepare for your UCAT. All you have to do is you can literally take out your phone and scan the QR code through your camera roll, or alternatively, go on our website and access the free module. But yeah, you guys can do that. And once again, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. I'll go on to the next slide now. Okay, so this slide, I'll let Alina take over because she is our UCAT expert and our tutor. And she'll talk you through a little bit about the UCAT and what you can expect. And then hopefully we've got some worked solutions along the way as well. And myself and Omar and Kalpesh, which is who's the co-founder of I Want to Be a Dentist, we're all in the chat as well. So you can ask us any questions you have along the way. So I'll just let Alina take over. I've done enough talking. So over to you, Alina.
Hi guys, so yeah, we're going to go through what the UCAT is, what it entails, and we'll go through a few worked examples with you as well, just so you know how to tackle some of the questions. So firstly, what is the UCAT? So UCAT stands for the University Clinical Aptitude Test, and it's basically the entrance exam that you take for a lot of medical schools and dental schools around the UK, as well as your A-levels to get onto the course. So the exam is 2 hours long and it's computer based, and it's normally done at your local test centre. And it consists of 5 sections, and it's all multiple choice, so there's no writing involved, you'll be happy to hear. So I'll just give this to Omar to explain the UCAT SEN as well.
All right, guys. So the UCAT SEN stands for the UCAT Special Educational Needs, which is basically another version of the UCAT, which is designed to be more accessible to different kinds of students with certain learning needs. And so usually you're given 25% more time. And this is for each section. So you're also entitled to a bunch of other things as well. So this can include cognition and learning difficulties. So for example, if you have dyslexia or anything like that, you can be able to ask for this extra time. And a lot of these different things here on the side, you can see you'll be able to apply for the UCAT SEN and just get that extra time because the UCAT is very time pressured. Next slide, please. All right, so when applying for the UCAT SEN, you're going to need to give evidence of this, and some of these things are written here. So you're going to need a letter signed by your institution. So this could be your sixth form college or your school. And this is basically talking about, it has to be explicitly stating the amount of time that you need, or if you need any rest breaks, and also just giving evidence of your learning disabilities, etc. So that's next slide, please. Right, so along with getting extra time, you can get 5 minutes rest breaks between each section. Now, usually if you take the standard UCAT, you get 1 minute rest break. So this is again just extending that break time. And there's also a version of the UCAT SEN where you can get 50% extra time. Now, this is all dependent on obviously your cognition abilities and communication skills, etc. So this really just is dependent on you and the evidence you can provide for the test center. And so when you're registering for the UCAT, this needs to be done between the 2nd of June and the 22nd of September. And for the UCAT SEN, registration is done as well between the 2nd of June and also, it opens on the 2nd of June at 9 a.m. and test booking opens on the 28th of June for test bookings, whereas on the 2nd of June, you'll be able to access all the arrangements and start actually applying. So Alina, do you want to take over?
Yeah, so as you know, of course, we're in the middle of a pandemic, if you have been living under a rock. And so as we know, UCAT is still planned to go ahead, but of course there is uncertainty around how it will work in the test centres, when they'll open, and how social distancing will happen. So we just want to let you know that we are committed to make sure that we're going to get you through the UCAT, and we're hoping that it does go ahead. And we're working with Pearson VUE to explore the number of tests delivered and scenarios, and just make sure that it's as easy as possible for you. The registration this year, as Omar said, isn't open yet, but we're anticipating testing to begin a bit later this year compared to normal. And as usual, continue to liaise with your uni, and we'll be doing the same with the unis regarding any decisions made towards the end of the year. So just keep an eye on our website and the UCAT website for any updates, and look for those around the 1st of June because registering will open just after that. So just going on to what you're all here for. So the UCAT structure. So we're just going to go through the structure and the timings just so you have a good idea on what it entails. So as I said, there's 5 sections. There's the verbal reasoning, there's the decision making, the quantitative reasoning, the abstract reasoning, and the situational judgment. So if we start with the verbal reasoning, as it says, it assesses the ability to critically evaluate information presented in a written form. So you'll be given an abstract or a subtext that's kind of like about a paragraph long, couple paragraphs long. So it's quite a lot of writing, and there's 44 questions with that verbal reasoning. And before the section starts, you get 1 minute of instructions that you can read through before you press start for the section. And there's 21 minutes of test time. Of course, with the UCAT SEN, you get extra time. So you get an extra 15 seconds of instruction time and an extra 15 seconds, 5 minutes and 15 seconds of the test time. Next is the decision making. So that assesses your ability to make sound decisions and judgments using complex information. So that's 29 questions. And again, you have the 1 minute and you have 31 minutes for your test time. And with the UCAT SEN, you get 38 minutes and 45 seconds. With the quantitative reasoning, that assesses your ability to critically evaluate information presented in a numerical form, so kind of the mathsy side of it. And that's 36 questions. Again, the 1 minute instructions, and you get 24 minutes of test time. And with the UCAT SEN, you get 30 minutes for the test time. Abstract reasoning assesses the use of convergent and divergent thinking to infer relationships from information. So that's looking at kind of patterns and puzzles. And that's 55 questions. Again, the 1 minute instructions, and you get 13 minutes of test time. For the UCAT SEN, you get 16 minutes and 15 seconds. And lastly, you have the situational judgment, which is kind of marked a bit differently, but we'll talk about that a bit later. And that measures the capacity to understand real world situations and to identify critical factors and appropriate behaviour in dealing with them. And that's 69 questions. Again, you get the 1 minute, and that's 26 minutes of test time. And for the UCAT SEN, that's 32 minutes and 30 seconds. So if your maths is better than mine, you can figure out that that's 233 questions altogether. And for the UCAT, you have 115 minutes altogether for the overall exam. And for the UCAT SEN, that's 143.75 minutes. So Omar, did you just want to talk about the format?
Yeah, so this UCAT exam is going to be taken in a test center, and this is a Pearson test center. So if any of you guys have taken a theory driving test, this will be in the same place. And when you go there, you're going to need to get your identity checked before you start and put all your belongings in a locker. And when you're actually sitting down at the computer, you're going to have a whiteboard, and you're going to have access to earplugs as well in case you want to remove any sort of distracting noise, and you'll be able to use the on-screen calculator that they have. So not a physical calculator. This is like a specific one to the software that they use.
I'd also say when practicing, try and practice having an on-screen calculator on your screen just so you can get used to it.
Yeah, definitely.
So if we just go through the calculations and marks, like I mentioned before, as you can see in the left-hand table, on the very left column, there is the overall estimated score. So that's kind of the overall score that the unis will be looking at. And if you look in the columns of the right, the breakdown is shown of the kind of score that you're given depending on the number of questions that you've got right. So of course, the more questions you get right, the higher your UCAT score. As I said, situational judgment is marked quite differently. It's marked in bands from 1 to 4. And so depending on the number of questions you get right, depends on the band that you're in. So band 1 is the number 1 band, and band 4 is the lowest. Some unis look at bands and some don't. So it really just depends. We'll talk about that a bit later. And you get your results immediately after taking your exam, just like Omar said with your driving exam, your theory driving exam, you get the results straight away. It's the same system. And as I said, each section is scored between 300 and 900, apart from the situational judgment.
So if you guys are applying for the second time, if you guys don't actually get the results that you want in the UCAT exam, there's a lot of things that you can do. So the first thing is don't give up, because the UCAT is only one part of the application process. There's still the personal statements, the interviews. There's a lot of different factors that universities will take into play here. And another thing is that you should do is that you should familiarize yourself with how different dental schools use the UCAT. So obviously not all dental schools use the UCAT, but the ones who do use it in different ways. So for example, some unis will have a cutoff score. Some unis will only really require a situational judgment band. And this is really important to do when you research the different unis you're applying for. And again, this sort of leads on to the point where you should reconsider university choices. So for example, if you get a high situational judgment score, you probably should apply to universities that will sort of favor that. And as an alternative, thinking about the BMAT, so perhaps if you're applying to dentistry, think about applying to Leeds and taking the BMAT, because they're the only university that doesn't actually take the UCAT. So as I just said, the only university that doesn't actually do the UCAT is Leeds University. All of the other universities in the UK will accept the UCAT as the entrance exam. So as I was saying earlier, the different universities will use the UCAT in different ways. So this is just a list. So for example, Aberdeen University will take all the UCAT scores from candidates and they're placed in deciles, and then UCAT accounts for 40% of your overall performance. So generally speaking, the higher you score, the more likely you're to get an interview. And for example, at Cardiff, they simply will just use the UCAT, and at universities like King's, for example, they'll just look at it very holistically, which is what a lot of universities do. And so each of these universities has different percentages. So that's something really important that you should take into account when you apply and choose your universities. So yeah, these are some other universities, and Raza, if you'd like to take over, talk about some of the revision tools.
Yeah, sure. So we just had a question in the chat about this, actually. Somebody said a little bit about using some of the Medify resources. Now, whereas we do recommend use a holistic range of resources to give you the more experience and exposure to different type of questions, we can't necessarily guarantee the resources of other platforms. But the only thing we can guarantee is the things that we actively ourselves have developed, such as our dental school book, which is basically like a guide of how to apply. Not only will you get UCAT questions in there, as well as UCAT guidance, you'll also get your personal statement help, your interview help. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop for all your dentistry needs, that book is. Now, we do recommend some other resources, however, which you can see on the screen. So there are various resources we do say that you can try out. So if I just go on to the next slide. So this is kind of like a QR screen, if you like. You can scan these codes, take you to various aspects of our UCAT services. So we have our UCAT Online Mastery course, which contains over 700 questions, worked examples, as well as access to our online UCAT portal. Now, what we've done is developed a like-to-like the UCAT exam portal, which basically allows you to experience what the UCAT exam is like from the comfort of your own home. So you can log on, you'll get given a username and a password. You log on to that portal and you can actually sit an unseen UCAT question test. What that will do is give you a great idea of where your revision is currently and things you can improve on. And then of course you can refer back to the course, which covers what you need to do for different type of questions and different type of sections within the UCAT. And we also have our one-to-one tuition, which basically is a tutor, for example, Alina, giving you one-to-one bespoke mentoring with different range of questions, as well as covering any sections or queries you have just before you sit your exam, or it could be well in advance. Now, lastly, we actually have our UCAT classroom dates. We've launched these very recently, and we've gained quite a lot of interest. Now, there's only 5 spaces available, because considering from last year when we ran the whole UCAT online classrooms, we got quite a lot of good positive feedback. So what we wanted to do is this year try it out with a smaller cohort so we can actually tackle your needs more directly. So what this UCAT online classroom will be, it begins actually on Sunday. This Sunday is our first UCAT lesson. And what it will be is it will be a tutor who has developed a full-on presentation as well as worked examples, and they'll sit through and teach you, and you'll have the opportunity to get a live Q&A, video recordings, as well as access to various aspects of our platform. And that's available. So there's only 5 spaces, and the first lesson, which actually begins, is on this Sunday. I think it's 6 to 7 p.m. But you can always scan this QR code or head over to our website to find more information about that. And that's basically it. We recommend these courses which we've developed, and we know that they will give you quite a lot of benefit if you do decide to go ahead with our services. Okay, and again, reiterating what I've previously said, the UCAT eLessons, this is kind of a breakdown of what they'll include. So as you can see, you'll have a live Q&A, small group tutorials, as well as covering every aspect of the UCAT. There'll also be mini tests in between to test your knowledge and see how well you're doing, as well as worked examples, and covering every aspect of the UCAT you need. You'll also get help to your access to your tutor, who will be available pretty much 24/7 for you. You can always email them and ask them questions, as well as outside the lesson, as well as inside the lesson. Now, like I've said, there's only 5 spaces, and we also offer our 50% bursary for any applicant who is from widening participation. All you have to do is scan that code, meet the eligibility criteria, send us an email with the relevant evidence, and we'll get back to you with a discount code, which gives you 50% off all of the lessons, not just 1, not just 2, but all 5 of the lessons. And there are the dates for the May month that we're running. So it'll be every Sunday, I believe, 6 to 7 p.m. And there's also 50% bursary for those from widening participation. And I think that's it for the UCAT lessons.
I was also just going to say, don't worry if you don't get space for the May sessions, because we will be running them in June and July as well.
Exactly, yeah, that's correct. We do intend to run these over monthly periods. They'll be the exact same lessons, but just run in different dates.
Yeah.
The tuition price is £125 for 5 lessons, and they're 1-hour lessons, but there's only 5 spaces. And if you do struggle with financially, we offer 50% bursary off for anybody who's eligible. And I think that's it for this slide. Now, there are many benefits to the UCAT eLessons. I'll let the tutor, who is Alina, explain and take over from this point.
Yeah. From personal experience, doing UCAT courses was probably the best decision I could have made when applying to dental school. I think if I hadn't, I would have had no idea what I was getting myself into. So honestly, from a personal view, I'd really recommend it. Previous students that have done the UCAT course have entered into the top decile scores, so they really do stand out, and it proves to be worth it. Of course, like Raza said as well, we offer the small group teaching. There's only a few of you, so we can really focus on what you find hard, how your learning is, and how we can tailor to your learning and our teaching to you. As Raza said as well, early prep is key. This increases confidence and reduces stress. You know what you're getting yourself into, you know what you're expecting. Of course, again, like I said, if the May slots are all booked up, we do have June and July, and I will be doing a few of those sessions. And we also offer the video recorded lessons as well for you to review and replay whenever you want, however many times you want. So just if I'll give you a couple seconds as well, if you want to scan this QR code, I think it's the same to the last slide, but if you've missed it, there it is again. Just give me a few seconds. Omar, how's the chat box? Have we managed to answer most of the questions?
You're muted, Omar.
Hold on. Yeah, my bad. So there's a few questions coming in about how often you should revise each day and how long you should prepare for. So do you want to give us a quick take on that, Lena?
Sorry, what was the question again?
So people are asking how much time a day should you revise for, and when you should start revising. So
okay, yeah, so as we said, revise as early as possible. Obviously you don't want to take away too much time, because you'll also be doing your A-levels as well, and you don't want to overload yourself as well. So I'd say probably about an hour or 2 each day. Small amount for a long period of time is a lot more effective, and especially if you're doing these e-lessons as well, that would count as a day's work. That would be enough. So just, it's all about making yourself familiar and practicing, really.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think as well, because someone else asked, when should you start revising for the UCAT? So probably, how much would you recommend? Say 6 to 8 weeks before the exam?
Yeah. You don't want to take off too much time from A-levels as well. That's kind of the key driving thing that's going to get you in. But you also want to give this importance too.
Yeah.
Any other questions? How realistic is it to get into graduate entry dentistry 4-year course with bad A-levels but a great UCAT? I'd say the UCAT is looked at a lot, but your grades will be looked at more. So I'd focus more on getting the grades and then the UCAT after.
It's for graduate entry, so surely with the graduate entry they really require the
Yeah, for graduate entry, they'll look at your degree. They won't.
Yeah, yeah. So your A-level grades won't really matter too much if you've done a degree.
Okay.
So now we're going to talk about resits and reapplications. So our recent data suggests that for every one place, there are up to 15 applicants, and as such, there is not insignificant chance that you may have to reapply. And this means you're going to have to resit the UCAT again, because you're going to have to resit it every time you want to apply in that application cycle. And yeah, so just keep in mind, if you're applying again, if you're a gap year student or if you're a graduate, you do have to sit the UCAT again. So that's definitely something to keep in mind and get ready for.
Yeah. As we said again, starting early is key. The reasons to start early would be to maximize your chance of covering more questions. With the UCAT, there is a pattern of similar questions being asked because they want to look at the same skills each year. So covering as many questions as possible will make sure that you follow all the skills that are needed and you attain all the skills needed for the exam. Again, it gives you good practice and you learn from errors, so you keep an eye out for what you should and shouldn't do. Also, especially with the abstract reasoning, it gives you the skill to be able to read and scan fast and the different techniques that you need to be able to pick out the key information quickly. And again, yeah, and you'll be able to make sure that you kind of practice enough. So if you do all the mock exams and everything, you'll know the kind of setup and things that you need and what you need to make sure you have a high mark.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because the more time you spend actually going through these questions, the faster you're going to be able to actually recognize patterns and things like that when it comes to abstract reasoning and some of the other sections as well.
Yeah. Why is the UCAT very important? I think this is one of the questions in the chat box actually. In some unis, as Omar mentioned, it could be weighted higher than A-levels, and that's because right now during COVID, unis can't always rely fully on A-levels because they're not like the formal exams, and so it's kind of relying more on the predicted grades. So a high UCAT maximizes your chance of entering the admissions process and reduces other factors that might come in the way. There's no excuses for universities to accept lower UCAT scores, as this is an entrance examination, not related to the course. The UCAT is the only test you have control over from now onwards to objectively separate from others. So this is something that you can really focus on and make sure that you gain all the skills you need for the exam. As we've mentioned also, the UCAT is one sitting, and so there's one chance for the application. So therefore you need to give it the really good and a high amount of importance so you get the best grade. So before we go through the worked examples, are there any other questions that?
Yeah, so some people are asking, how much will unis value GCSEs for the next year's entry? Do you know much about that?
Not too much, but I assume because of COVID and the fact that they're relying on predicted grades, they could look at GCSEs. But if most of you who are in this talk have probably done your GCSE, so that's not something you need to worry about right now. Just focus on your A-levels and focus on the UCAT itself and just do the best that you can. Someone's asked, how will the eLessons be structured? So if you read on the website, that will give you all the information you need really, but you'll have one tutor. So I'm one of the tutors, and we'll go through, there's a 5-hour block that we have that's spread out, and we'll go through the sections, we'll go through any questions you have, we'll go through worked examples. So kind of similar to this talk, but in more detail. You'll get to really understand how the exam works. When's the best time to do your test? I did it quite late just because I wanted to focus on my A-levels. I don't know if Omar did the same.
I did mine mid-September. I was actually on holiday that year, so obviously it all depends on you and what your situation's like. But most people do it in August just because it's midsummer holidays. There's not a big focus on A-levels and exams and stuff. So it's just dependent on you, whatever is best for your situation. Exactly.
So yeah, I'd say, well, I did it around August time, Emma did it around September. So whenever's best for you, whatever your situation is. if you don't do very well, can you resit the UCAT? You can only resit UCAT the following year. So you get one chance every single year to do that. Cal has actually put in a few details on the eLessons if you look in the chat box as well. So you get 5 one-hour tuition sessions via Zoom with a tutor, like I said, such as me, and we'll cover all the topics, examples and questions. Each student gets a private WhatsApp group and free 125 UCAT question booklet and recordings of the sessions.
Someone's asked about work experience. So someone said, how much work experience do you expect to do? And is virtual work experience valued the same as face-to-face experience? So personally, just because of COVID, you know, most work experience isn't actually possible. So face-to-face isn't really an option for most people. So universities are going to obviously take that into consideration, understand that, you know, this is not, you know, this is not ideal for most students. So definitely as much experience as you can get doing virtual courses, doing online courses and things like that, it's really going to benefit you. So we actually have our own online course as well for work experience, which includes a journaling system, so you can actually reflect on your work experience. So just check that out. I'll probably put a link to that in the chat soon.
Just to reiterate again, as Cal said, you can only take the UCAT once a year. So it's really important that you focus on it and do the best that you can. And of course, the eLessons will be your best opportunity to be able to do that if you look on our website. And this question's been asked before, but I'll just go through it again. What will the weighting be like for the UCAT in terms of graduates? Omar answered that question in the chat, and he said that it's basically the same weighting. So just do the best that you can and hold it with the same importance, really. So we're going to go through the worked examples now. We're going to go through one question per section. And we're just going to give you the top tips and everything that you need to be able to go through that. Okay. So firstly, we'll talk about verbal reasoning. So verbal reasoning is the section that I mentioned previously, where you get a passage of text. And it's normally between 200 and 300 words. And after this, you have to answer 4 related questions to that passage. Okay. When reading any documents, you need to be able to scan for the appropriate information as quickly as possible. So you need to be able to pick out keywords and make sure that you know what you're looking for straight away, instead of having to read the whole passage again and again for each question. When reading research, you need to be able to analyze and attain the appropriate information. So that's what I've just said, just making sure that you can pick out what you're looking for and not waste time. This will be useful because when talking to patients, it will help you gain the most important pieces of information that you need to act on. Commonly with patients, they will tell you their whole life story, and you need to be able to pick out everything you can that's kind of key in what you need to be able to help them. So there are 4 different question types you can get with verbal reasoning. You can get true, false, and can't tell questions. So it'll have a statement and you have to say whether it's true or false, or if you can't tell from the passage. Then you have an incomplete statement. So you'll have a half-written statement where the sentence isn't finished, and you have to be able to give the best answer possible for the question. And then you can get it according to or deduced from the passage. So kind of what the passage is trying to hint at, and the best answer for that, the most accurate answer, because a lot of the answers will be very similar to what the passage is trying to say, but you need to find the most accurate answer. And lastly, exceptions. So kind of finding the odd one out. So the tips that we have 4 main tips here for the verbal reasoning is try to improve your reading speed and comprehension in order to perform more efficiently. You are going to get passages of information that are 200 to 300 words long. So you need to be able to read as quickly as possible and understand what you're reading, as well as reading it fast. Don't stress too much about reading as quickly as possible, because again, you need to be able to have the skill, as mentioned in the second tip, to scan for keywords. So if you can't read very fast, of course, try to. But if you can't, use that skill of being able to pick out keywords and identify what the question's really asking for. A key tip here in the grey box is read the question first. I cannot stress this enough.
Yeah, definitely.
It's so important. Omar, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I was just going to say that there's like often like sort of a split opinion whether you should read the question first or read the passage first, but it's definitely better to read the question first, because when you're skimming the passage, you have something that you're actively looking for, and that just makes the process so much faster.
Definitely. The third one is don't get bogged down in one question. If you think you spent too much time on it, move on. It's so easy to get psyched out during the exam. There's so many stresses in your head and so many things going through your head. You just really, really need to focus on what you're doing at that present time, and keep your head straight. Don't get worried about getting a question wrong, because you probably will get more than one question wrong, but you just need to focus on what you're doing there and then. And lastly, practice timings. Timing is key. You'll be pushed for time during the exam. And so if you constantly practice questions, even if you're reading through a newspaper or an article and you're like, right, let me pick out the key points from this article in a newspaper or a magazine, that's good practice. And being able to do it in a certain amount of time will be really useful. So here is the first question. This is a verbal reasoning question. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes just to see what you think the answer would be. If you put the answers in the chat, don't be afraid to say the wrong answer. It's fine. It's all going to be anonymous. No one's going to say any names. And then we'll go through how to work that out. So I'll give you 1 minute from now. If you want to unmute yourselves and say the answer, that's fine as well. Again, one of the questions here was, Omar's answered it, but how long should you take to read the passage? As Omar said, it's not about time yourself to read the passage, it's about picking out the key information and finding out what you need rather than giving yourself a certain amount of time. So I'll just give you 30 more seconds for that. It's okay if you haven't, you weren't able to answer it. I'm going to go through it now anyway. Okay, so we're just going to go through this first question. So as we said, one of our key tips is to read the question first. So the question or statement says, using information in the passage, it can be inferred that the strict settlement was. So this is a deduced kind of question. What is the statement? What is the paragraph inferring? So if we look at the first option here, A, it says, the strict settlement was a discovery made accidentally by Bridgman. As we can see here, a keyword that will stand out for us is Bridgman. So if we look at the text, we can see straight away the name Bridgman, Orlando Bridgman, is here straight away. And from this, we can read a bit previously and a bit after from that keyword, so we can figure out what the text is trying to say. So in the sentence, it says, then in the 1650s, Orlando Bridgman invented a scheme to protect royalist estates. As you can see here, the key word here is invented. So of course, it can't be accidental because Bridgman did it knowingly. So we can cross that out as one of the options. We know it can't be that. Next, we'll look at the option B, and it says strict settlement was a device to avoid paying land and property taxes. So again, looking at sort of words that say payment, taxes, property, anything. And again, we can see it straight away in the first paragraph. It says defeated royalists did not want to be forced to sell their property or to pay fines imposed by Parliament. Of course, fines imposed by Parliament would infer taxes. And so this could be an option because we can see that the royalists did not want to pay these taxes. So I'm just going to put a little line here to say that this could be one of the answers. Of course, if you think an answer is right, don't automatically just assume that that's the right answer until you've read the rest of the statements, of course, unless you're pushed for time. So option C says the strict settlement was only of practical use to wealthy landowners. Again, picking out the keywords. As we can see, if we scan through, landowners is a keyword in the second paragraph. And if we read the whole sentence, it says, soon it was adopted by lawyers and landowners as the normal method to transfer land between generations. So as we can see, only in the statement is quite a definitive word. So we have to look, and we can see that lawyers and landowners adopted this method. So it can't be only wealthy landowners. Okay, so we can cross that out. Keywords like only can kind of trick you out, because you would think, oh, landowners do use it, so that could be the right answer. But make sure that you read the whole statement and the whole sentence. And of course, that answers our last statement, unpopular with members of the legal profession. As we know, lawyers are members of the legal profession, and the method was also adopted by them. So it can't be that unpopular, can it? So we'll cross that one out. And so the answer here is B. Any questions regarding that at all? I'll move on to the next and we'll move on. So yeah, the reason why it's not C is, of course, that it says only practical use to wealthy landowners. And as we can see, lawyers are involved here as well in the sentence. So make sure you're reading the full sentence and not just where the keywords are, because then you won't be able to understand what the passage is trying to say. And again, the last statement is answer for you when it says unpopular with members of the legal profession, because lawyers are there as well. So if that doesn't make any sense to anyone, just mention in the chat. But in the chat, someone's just said that makes sense. So I'm going to assume that that's fine. So we're going to move on to the next section. So this is decision making. I find this section quite fun personally. It's got patterns and different things like that. So it's quite fun if you kind of know what you're doing, and hopefully by the end of this talk, you will know what you're doing. So these questions give you information in the form of text, charts, tables, diagrams, or graphs. So there's lots of different formats that this question can be in. And the questions have data in that you have to be able to answer and depict. So yeah, this will be really helpful as a medical professional, because you'll need to add logic and reason when making a decision, especially when in an emergency. So the types of questions you'll get with decision making, there's quite a few. So as I mentioned before, you'll have logical puzzles, you'll have syllogisms, data interpretation, assumption recognition, diagrams, and probabilities. And the tips that we have 4 main tips here. There is to eliminate irrelevant data. You will sometimes get weird charts and weird diagrams with lots and lots of information. And another tip I give here that isn't on here is, again, to read the question first, because that can stop you from reading irrelevant data and looking at irrelevant parts of the chart when you actually don't need to, and you'll be wasting time doing that. Practice logical reasoning. If you look at the book that we have that was on the previous slide, that was released by I Want to Be a Dentist company, that will give you tips on logical reasoning. Revise probabilities, and make some of them can be of mathematical nature. So you just have to be able to practice all sides of it. It's not just charts and pictures. And also sketch diagrams. That will help you be able to picture what the question is trying to say if there isn't a diagram or graph there. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes again for this one. So you have a chart here. Again, read the question first and let me know what answer you get. Is decision making similar to abstract reasoning? Not quite, no. We'll go on to abstract reasoning and what it entails, but abstract reasoning looks at patterns more, and decision making looks at logical reasoning more.
Yeah, there's also a lot of variation when it comes to decision making. There's a lot of types of questions,
yeah,
whereas abstract reasoning is a lot more fast paced, and it's just recognizing patterns.
Exactly. So we have quite a few answers coming through now, so we'll just
most of them are. Let's see. So
yeah. So again, reading the question first, which of the following letters represents workers who get to work using a combination of car, train, and walking? So if we look at the diagram here, The sentence above says the diagram shows how the employees in one department of a small business travel to work each day using different forms of transport. And each shape here represents a different form of transport, okay? And without wasting time, we can look at the question straight away, and it tells us the transport that we need to look at. So we're looking at cars, trains, and walking. So we're looking at the triangle shape, the square shape, and the circle shape. So first we'll look at cars. Cars are the triangle shape, and we want to see which letters are encompassed within this shape. And that will tell us which workers will be using this mode of transport, okay? So first looking at cars, this is the triangle shape here. We can see the letters K, J, and L are encompassed within this triangle. So that means letters K, J, and L are the workers that use cars as a mode of transport. M is not encompassed within this triangle. So that means that M does not use cars as a mode of transport. So we can rule out M. Now we'll look at train. Train is the square shape, and train encompasses K, J, and L still. So we can't rule out any other letters right now. Because they all both use car and train, because both letters are encompassed within the triangle and the square. Lastly, we'll look at walking. And as we can see, walking is a circular shape. So we have to see which letter out of K, J, and L is encompassed by the triangle, the square, and the circle. And as we can see, L is the only letter that is encompassed by all three shapes. So the answer here is C. L is the employee that takes car, train, and walking as modes of transport. Does that make sense to everyone? Any questions at all?
So I think pretty much everyone got that one. Does anyone understand the process? I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
The thought process through it. Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
How fast? So someone said, how fast should you be able to do this? So the decision-making section, I think, is one of the most relaxed. I think it's the most relaxed section in terms of timing. I think you have about 30 seconds per question.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, with questions like this, I think these tend to be some of the more faster questions that you do on that section, just because some of the other ones need a lot of reading. So somewhere around 30 seconds, I would say, for this question. Yeah. Right? Don't you think, Lena?
Yeah, I wouldn't also tell yourself that you need a certain amount of time for each question. Of course, aim for about 30 seconds, as Omar said, but you will gain time if you answer one question quicker than another. For example, this question is a lot quicker, so you'll be able to answer this and gain time in another question where you'll need it.
Yeah, I think another thing, sorry, I just want to say, when it comes to like practicing questions, when you do so many of these, you're going to know what 30 seconds feels like. So when it passes by, you're going to realize that you're spending too much time and it's time to move on. So, you know, exactly. Just knowing that and doing that much practice is really just going to help you understand the timing aspect of the exam.
Exactly. And someone's also asked, how advanced can these questions get? With each person, it really depends, because with decision making, there's so many different types of questions that you can get. It really depends on where your strength is and where your weakness is. But as long as you practice, they aren't too advanced, as long as you kind of know what you're expecting.
Definitely.
Okay. So the third section that we're going to go through is quantitative reasoning. So this is the numerical side of of the UCAT. So you'll be given numerical data, and it will be in the form of charts, tables, or graphs, and there will be multiple questions per data set. Okay. A good understanding of GCSE maths will be a good foundation for this. So just kind of understanding quick mental maths as well. If you don't have time to click every single button on the on-screen calculator, having that good practice of GCSE or foundation maths will be very good. A large part of any medical profession is to analyse and interpret numerical data, whether that's in medicine or dentistry. So this can be relevant to both in practice and in research. You'll constantly be using this throughout your career. So we have three types of questions: interpreting statistics, spatial reasoning, and interpreting data sets. So we'll go through to this example. I'll give you again a couple minutes. Again, read the question first. That is always going to be my top tip for every single section that you do. So yeah, just make sure you read through that. The information can look daunting, but again, if you read the question first, you'll realize what you can cut out and what you can keep in. Someone's asked as well, are the practice exams and questions on the UCAT website the same format as the actual exam? They're pretty similar.
Yeah.
With most online exams, you'll get the question and it'll be a multiple choice. So it's not too different in terms of format.
Yeah, even the software, I think, as well. Like it looks pretty much the same as it would on the actual exam day.
Yeah, exactly. Someone's asked what's considered a bad score for the UCAT. There is no score that's kind of considered a bad score. It firstly depends on how everyone's done that year, because you'll be averaged. You might think that your score is particularly low compared to someone that did it last year, but you might average higher than someone else this year because the scores might have been lower on average. And again, it depends on how much universities look at it and how much they weigh it. In terms of admissions. So don't focus too much on what score am I going to get, just focus on how you're going to tackle the exam itself, because you don't want to psych yourself out. Okay, so we'll go through this. Bear with me, I am writing with my laptop, so my lines might be questionable. So if we look at the question here, it says each edge of a carton is strengthened using tape. How much tape in centimeters is required to strengthen all edges of 80 cartons? Before even looking at the information given, we have to see that the question is asking for the answer to be in centimeters. So we need to make sure that we don't forget that part, okay? So as we can see, we want to know how much tape we need for all the edges of 80 cartons. So if we look at the information here, we don't need this sentence. We don't need to know when the factory closes. We don't need to know what time it opens and when it runs. We don't need to know how many cartons it makes in an hour. We don't need to know that it makes closed boxes, and we don't need to know the measurements for the boxes. The only piece of information we need is this, the measurements for the cartons. So again, you can see how much information has been cut out just by reading the question straight away. So if I try and attempt to draw out a carton, it's a cuboid shape, okay? That's probably the best I'm going to be able to do. So as you can see, there's two here. I'm trying to fix that a little bit. Okay, so we can see the measurements here are 2 and 2, because you always have a square on one side of the cuboid and a rectangular side on the other side. So this would be the 3 measurement, okay? So we need to figure out first the measurement and the length of all the edges of one carton, okay? So as we can see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 over here, edges of the 2 faces of the squares that are 2. So if we have 4 2-meter edges on one face, that is 2, 4, 6, 8, okay? So we have 8 meters per face, and we have 2 lots of those, so 8 times 2, because remember it's a 3D shape, okay? So that is 16 meters. And remember to write meters so you don't forget what unit you're working in. 16 meters just for these edges here. So this one and this one, okay? So these edges here. And then we have to remember that it is a 3D cuboid shape. So we have 4 lots of these 3-meter edges as well. So we have 3 times 4. Again, it won't take this long in the actual exam. I'm just going through it as slowly as possible so everyone understands. So that means we have, if anyone doesn't understand that, we have the 4 sides of the 3-meter measurement, because that's the cuboid shape. And then we have 2 square faces on either side of that rectangle shape. And those are 2 meters by 2 meters. So we need to make sure we add up the length of all the sides that we have, okay? Check that's fine. Okay, and so Let me just try and close this. Okay, and so now we need to add up the measurement of the edges all together. So these are the edges that we have for each of the faces. And if we add that up, that is 28 meters altogether. So that 28 meters means that there is 28 meters of tape needed for one carton to cover all those edges, okay? Here you have a choice. You can either times this by 80 straight away to figure out the number of edges that we need for 80 cartons, but this will give you the answer in meters, or you can convert it to centimeters and then times it by 80. I don't know about Omar, but I'd personally recommend keeping it at meters right now, because if you convert it, you can lose a lot of zeros, misplace them, and you won't.
Yeah, definitely. Do your conversions at the end. It definitely helps.
Yeah.
To manage everything. Yeah.
So here you can use the calculator for questions like this, sums like this, you can do in your head, and that will save so much time rather than typing it on the calculator. But for sums like this, such as 28 times 80, if you aren't the quickest at mental maths, you can put that in the calculator. So if we do 28 meters times 80, that will give us the number of edges we need for 80 cartons, and that'll give us the overall measurement we need in meters, okay? So if you guys have done that calculation, 28 times 80 is 2,240. Remember, this is in meters, okay? So now this is our answer. We need to be able to convert that into centimeters, because this is what the questions ask for, okay? So we know 1 meter is 100 centimeters, okay? Excuse my writing on a laptop. So
Doing a solid job, honestly. I don't know how I do this. So
1 meter is 100 centimeters. So that means 2,240 meters converted in centimeters is 224,000 centimeters. And as we can see, that is option D. Okay, does anyone have any questions regarding that? I know it seems long-winded, but if you're doing it on your own and doing all your mental maths, it's honestly a lot quicker than you think. There are fewer questions for this section as well, so you don't need to worry. Yeah, as Omar said, you will have whiteboards for this to note down everything you need. Again, in the decision making as well, you can draw out what you need. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to type that in, but we'll move on to the next section now. Oh, sorry, tips for quantitative reasoning. I don't think that was in the right order. So eliminate irrelevant information and data, okay? So again, reading the question first, we can cut out all the things that we don't need. As you can see, when I did that example, I cut out so many things straight away and I was able to tackle the question straight away. Use standard form where possible. So that will help you make sure that you don't lose all the zeros and get confused with that. If the question allows, go through answers instead of solving, okay? So the example I did there was a solving question because it can be quite hard, but if you go through the answers and you can see the measurements and you can make a rough estimate, a lot of the time that saves a lot of time. So yeah, just making sure that you kind of know your multiplication, your times table, so you can make rough estimates on what you think the best answer will be for quicker questions. Yeah, make sure you convert correctly. That's such an easy mistake to make, and some questions will try and trick you out and they will have similar answers, so just make sure that you don't fall for that. And don't round too early. You can end up rounding within the first sum and you can get a completely different answer to what the actual correct answer is. So don't be too quick to round. Okay, right, abstract reasoning. So this will give you different patterns to interpret and analyze. Some questions may involve understanding a pattern and progression, and some may involve placing patterns into sets. As a medical professional, you'll need to identify symptoms and clues. So this is really good practice for that. A lot of the time, patients might not know what's wrong with them. And it's your job to figure out the kind of things that they're describing to you and link those to symptoms and different clues that they're giving you to be able to have a diagnosis. When you have determined possible reasons, you'll need to test and check them, okay? So if you think that one of the patterns follows a certain format, test that with one of the other boxes to see if it actually works, okay? There are 4 different question types, again, for abstract reasoning. So you have either pattern, set A, set B, or neither. So you'll get given 2 different examples of patterns, and you have to say whether they are within the set A patterns, whether they're in the set B patterns, or whether it's not applicable to any. Okay. One of them might be completing the pattern series. So you'll get a number of boxes that has a series of patterns, and you have to try and finish it off with the options given. You'll never have to try and make a pattern, so don't worry about that. Pattern set belonging. So you'll have, again, set A and set B, and you'll get given a pattern and you have to choose which one that belongs into. And you'll get a number of those patterns, so you have to do that for a certain number of patterns given. And pattern relation, so just again figuring out a relationship that's going on there, okay? So this is our example. Again, I'll give you a couple minutes. Don't get too freaked out about this question. It is something different to what you're used to doing. So just take your time, figure out and look at the different types of questions that I mentioned previously and see if any of those are linked to this, okay? Any questions, just feel free to put that in the chat.
I've got some answers starting to come in.
Okay, right. So as we can see from these boxes, we have set A and set B. And this is the type of question where you choose set A, set B, or neither, okay? So the first thing to do, I would personally say, is to look at the different sets and kind of see which patterns, what kind of patterns they give off. This is kind of different to the other sections, because sometimes it's best to look at the patterns and sets first. I don't know if Omar agrees.
Yeah, definitely. I think the most important thing is trying to recognize what pattern is in which set. And obviously, the more you do this, the quicker this is going to be like second nature to you, hopefully, by the end of your revision, because of just the volume of questions you've done and the sets and patterns you've seen.
Yeah, exactly. So, and with this as well, you'll get given the set A, set B, and you'll get like I think about 4 questions where you have to match it. Yeah. Once you've figured out the pattern, you'll be able to answer all those questions so quickly.
Yeah.
So if we look at this pattern here, we can see that there's a kind of white cross shape and a black oval shape. If we look at the sets here, first we'll look at color. We can see that there's not really a pattern in terms of color and the number of colors, or if certain colors are a certain shape, so we can rule that out. There isn't any pattern in terms of positions of shapes, so we can't see any positions there, okay? The only thing that I can see from first viewing this would be that set A are round shapes and set B are straight line shapes and hard angles, okay? And sometimes it is as simple as that, and sometimes you might be overthinking the question, but sometimes you just have to look back and see, well, actually it's a lot more simple than I think. So I would go with set A are rounded shapes and set B are straight lined angled shapes. As we can see in this pattern given, this shape is hard angles and straight lines, and this shape is circular. So this square wouldn't fit in either of those sets. So the answer here would be C, neither. It doesn't fit in any of the sets, okay? So
I just want to add a quick tip when it comes to doing abstract reasoning, and that's to really focus on the simplest shapes. So for example, as you can see on set A, the the shape on the top right is one of the simpler shapes. And this is because all the shapes in that set are going to have the same pattern. So sometimes there's going to be like a box with lots of complicated shapes, but it will still follow the same pattern. And that's sort of there to just distract you and try to essentially waste your time. But so it's really important to, when you're starting to compare the different sets, is to really look at the simpler shapes first.
That's a really good tip because it'll save you so much time.
Yeah.
Okay. And so these are some of the tips to look at, and this will kind of help you cut out all the possible answers that it can't be, because if you look at the patterns, you can see, as you can see my thought process when I was going through answering that question, positions of the shapes weren't any different, the colors of the objects weren't any different, there weren't any intersections of the objects, so no like lines going through it, no shapes kind of intersecting each other. There weren't a certain number of angles or types of angles that were needed, weren't a certain number of sides, no symmetry, no certain number of objects. So sometimes you could have one of the sets has only an odd number of shapes, one set only has an even number of shapes, and there's no type. Well, there was type of size and object. So that was the one that we helped us answer the question. So we saw that in set A, it was only circular and round shapes. And in set B, there were hard lines. So using this list is actually really useful to be able to eliminate the patterns that it would not be. Okay. So lastly, we are onto our situational judgment. This can either catch people out or people can be quite good at it. And again, the key thing here is to practice. You'll be given written scenarios of medical situations, and you'll be asked if a series of actions are important or appropriate. The relevance should be clear in your day-to-day. You'll see a lot of different scenarios where you'll have to practice and make a lot of judgments. Sometimes you might feel one answer is more correct than another. And the way that this is marked is kind of making sure that you're on the right side of the spectrum, making sure that you haven't given something really high importance that isn't actually that much importance. Okay. There are three types. So there's appropriateness, so what you feel like the best action is, the most appropriate action. The next one is importance, so how highly would you hold a certain statement in terms of importance, and some of them might be ranked from most to least. Okay. So again, a couple minutes just to go through this example. Again, the key thing here is just to make sure that you're on the right side of the spectrum, okay? Making sure you're picking what you think is best.
Yeah, you do get partial marking in this section. So for example, if the answer is important and you answer the one that's closest to importance, so very important or of minor importance, you do get partial marks. So just making sure you understand the general concepts is the most important thing in the section.
Exactly. So for example, if you chose something that was of minor importance and it actually wasn't important at all, you will still get a small amount of points for picking of minor importance. I'll just give you a couple more minutes. Again, this is the kind of question where you probably would have to read through the example. It depends on the question given, but it's best to be able to assess what the statement fully says.
I think this is also similar to abstract reasoning, where you get the same paragraph for a few questions and they give you a few different sentences to rank the importance of and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay, so if we just read through the passage, we've got a few answers coming through now. A patient tells a final year medical student, Jake, about a conversation he had with another final year student, Eloise. The patient says that Eloise boasted about submitting an essay in her first year of medical school that she had copied from a sample essay on the internet. Eloise is generally thought of as an excellent, honest, and hardworking student. The patient is known to have told lies about students and medical staff previously. How important to take into account are the following considerations for Jake when deciding how to respond to the situation? So one of the statements is Eloise's current reputation within the medical school as someone who is unlikely to copy essays from the internet. If we look at the question is asking how important is it to take into account this consideration when Jake is making a decision on how to respond to the situation, okay? So firstly, you have to think, how would Jake respond? Jake would probably talk to Eloise first and then speak to the medical school if need be. So Eloise's reputation actually wouldn't influence Jake's response to the situation, because he would still speak to her, and if she didn't comply, he would still speak to the medical school. So I would say this answer is not important at all. But of course, if you picked of minor importance, you would still get marks for that. And it depends on how the UCAT marks this. But I would say, because it's looking at how Jake would respond to a situation, it shouldn't influence how he responds to a situation, because he would still have to speak to her. So I would say not important at all. Okay. So tips for the situational judgment: read up on the GDC and GMC guidelines. So the GMC is good medical practice and the GDC is standards and guidance. If you look them up on the internet, they will give you different types of practice and guidance that's needed, and that dentists and medics follow from day to day. And this will give you the kind of ethos and ethical understanding that you need to be able to answer these questions, okay? Because as someone who might not be educated in that area, because you haven't been able to read through the standards yet or the practice, you might not know the best way to come across and the best decision to make when you're in certain situations. So if you read up on those, you'll be able to understand. And lastly, understand key values. So looking at integrity, teamwork, and general key values, and just making sure that you understand those and can pick the best decision. Oh, a bit faster. So lastly, we're just going to go through general tactics and tips. So this is probably one of the most useful parts of the presentation. So when revising, use the official calculator available on the UCAT website. So that's the on-screen calculator. And you have to be able to practice using that as quick as possible, because it can waste time if you don't know how to use
definitely.
that. Yeah.
I also recommend getting like a computer mouse. So if you use a laptop, you can buy like a really cheap mouse with a USB and use that, because you'll have access to a computer mouse in the actual exam. So having that is just going to sort of train your muscle memory to actually use the calculator as fast as possible.
Yeah, exactly. But also, where you can, please rely on your mental maths, because waste time typing in 4 times 2 into a calculator just to be sure you don't have time for that, unlike O-level maths exams. When revising, also time yourself when doing question sections and understand the time pressure. You don't want to be doing it leisurely at home and then when you get into the test centre freak out because you don't have enough time, okay? So just make sure that you've got yourself into that mindset, just always preparing yourself with what's to come. Make sure you take breaks and exercise, okay? Don't get your head stuck in books the whole time. You're going to absolutely go crazy. You're going to work yourself up and you're going to get really stressed. Just make sure that you balance your time correctly. Keep a healthy mindset. Make sure that you're eating properly. And yeah, in the exam as well, you will get time for breaks, because you get the 1 minute of instructions. That kind of gives you a bit of time to breathe, because you kind of know what to expect. And make sure you reflect on your mistakes. Make sure you learn from those, because that will really help you make sure to know what to look out for and what to not look out for, etc. In the exam, go with your gut. You won't really have time to dwell on a answer that you've chosen. And a lot of the time, your gut feeling tends to be the right thing. So yeah, we really recommend going with your gut. Take advantage of the lack of negative marking, okay? So if you get something wrong, they don't take away marks from you, especially in situational judgment. You still get marks even if your answer's wrong. So just make sure that you understand that, and don't stress out about that, because you don't want that to get into your head when you're
also just answer every single question. Like, it doesn't like if you're out of time, then literally it's best to just guess and just move on.
Yeah,
because you might just get the mark.
Yeah,
you've really nothing to lose.
Yeah, and every mark counts.
Yeah, exactly.
And lastly, use the minute before the start of the section to reset yourself and prepare for the next section. You might have had one section that might have been your weakest or you thought didn't go so well. Make sure that you reset your mindset and make sure that you are mentally ready to prepare for the next section, okay? Each section is different. You're going to be able to tackle them in different ways. So don't get bogged down on one section.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're just going to go to questions now. If anyone has any
Yeah.
questions, put them on the chat. I know Cal's here to also answer, but thanks for coming. If you don't have
thank
any
you guys.
questions, and just make sure you look on our website as well for the eLessons, because they will get booked up. We've only got 5 slots per eLesson. So just make sure that you get on that website and book as soon as you can. We have them in May, June, and July. Check the website, message us on Instagram, Facebook, anything on email. We'll be there to answer. We've got a few questions coming through now.
So someone said, does everyone get the same set of questions? So no, everyone gets a completely unique set of questions.
Yeah.
That's something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Do you recommend doing revision sessions generally or working on specific sections? So yeah, someone's asking whether you should revise generally or work on specific sections. So I think I'm not sure what Alina thinks, but as you're doing questions, you're going to realize that there's some sections you're weaker on, and everyone has that. You have your strengths and weaknesses. So it's really important that you focus on your weaknesses, because at the end of the day, you're going to get an average score.
Yeah.
And obviously work on all the sections, don't neglect anything, but it's really important to focus on your weaknesses. And if there's no way for you to track your progress on whatever question bank you're using, try to make a spreadsheet or something that will help you sort of just keep an eye on how you're progressing, essentially.
Yeah. And you'll realize kind of which sections you're better at, which sections you're not. Yeah, just focus on
quite
that
quickly. Yeah, definitely.
Do you recommend doing revision sessions generally or working on specific sections? I would personally say make sure you revise first and then work on the sections. And that's why these eLessons are so good, because they'll make sure that you've got the revision intact, and then all you have to do is practice the questions, because you know what to expect and you know how to tackle each question. So you don't have to waste time on revision sessions, and you can just go straight into questions after you've done the eLessons.
Yeah, so Abby's asked, if you finish one section early, can you carry on with that same amount of time? And no, you can't. So each section is independently timed. So if you have, for example, 25 minutes for one of the sections and you finish early, you're going to start with the same standard amount of time for the next section. You're not going to get extra time. So when finishing early, it's really important to just go back, make sure you've checked everything. If you've got questions that you weren't sure of that you flagged, it's really important that you go back and just make sure you've double checked them.
Someone's also asked, how many questions should we complete in our revision session? E.g. studying for an hour, how many should we be able to complete? Again, it depends on what section you're doing. So be able to time yourself and do that number of questions maybe in that section within a certain amount of time. But don't give yourself kind of the number of questions you need to complete. Give yourself the mindset of, right, I'm going to do this until I feel like I've understood this, or I'm going to do this until I feel like I've got a certain number of questions right in this amount of time, okay?
So what are the timings for each section? So the timings, there was an earlier slide which had the timings, but you can also find them on the UCAT website. There's like a table with all the timings for each section. Someone said, what did you guys get in the UCAT? How long did you study for? Do you want to share, Alina?
Yeah, I got 700 in mine. How long did I study for? I think I probably started just towards the end of my A-levels, so I was making sure that I got my A-levels done first. That was what, in probably June time, and yeah, just started doing about an hour a day, so just really chill, an hour a day. And by the time I did my exam in August, I feel like I knew what I was doing, because I've done so much.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I prepared for about 6 weeks, so when I started, I had no idea what I was doing. I was getting like rubbish scores, but I ended up getting 740. So that just goes to show it really just is about practice. I practiced for about 2 hours, I'd say maybe a day on average. Obviously, when it was close to the exam, you're a lot more stressed, you're doing more papers, but it's just the more you practice, the better you're going to get.
And definitely with these eLessons, if you get them in as soon as you can, or whenever you're available, they will really help you understand.
Yeah, getting that core understanding in the beginning is really important as well. Understanding the different types of questions within each section is key.
Yeah. Someone's asked, I'm resitting my A-levels in October and want to get my UCAT done in around early August. What would you recommend time-wise for summer? As we said, so I did mine in August, and I started mine probably end of June. So yeah, just kind of whenever you feel like is best, but we'd probably recommend 6 to 8 weeks, hours a day. It's just really, really chill. Do you recommend keeping entire exams until last minute, like those on physics, maths, tutor? Okay, well, I don't know about Omar, but I'd personally say first, make sure you revise and know what to expect. So going to these e-lessons, buying the book, making sure you know what to expect, and then focus on questions. It's never too early to do questions. Even if they're the same ones, you'll be able to learn your mistakes. I did them till I was blue in the face.
So. Yeah, me too. And I think when it comes to like the whole exams, I wouldn't recommend leaving them all to the last minute. I think it's important that you do like sort of do them periodically. So maybe once every 1 or 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Just do one exam, and that way you'll be able to really just track how you're doing.
Yeah. And go through those exams once you've done them.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Do you recommend what the timings for each section? I can flip back for you actually.
Someone said, is the BMAT harder than the UCAT? So this is like, it's debatable. Everyone has a different opinion on this, I think, but only for dentistry, only Leeds does the BMAT, and it's a different exam entirely. It's got a science section, it's got an essay, right?
Yeah, it tests like physics and maths and English. It's completely different. I did both the BMAT and the UCAT.
Yeah, I never took the BMAT, so you'll probably explain that.
I did both the BMAT and the UCAT, and I'd probably say BMAT's a bit easier, but that's just because I didn't really mind writing essays. But I mean, I did okay in both. I did quite well in both, and that's all just down to practice, honestly. So it doesn't really matter too much. Any other questions? Yeah, it kind of just depends on like what you feel you're more confident at. So yeah, I think I probably did better in my UCAT than I did my BMAT, but I probably enjoyed my BMAT more. So depends. Any other? Do you know when booking for BMAT opens? Check the website. If you send us a message on Instagram, we'll try and get back to you about that. I don't have them to hand right now. Again, the average score differs between each year. So it depends on how everyone else has done. So we can't really give you an average score of what people tend to get. But I'd try and aim for probably above 650, I'd say.
Yeah, I say high 600s. You have a good chance of pretty much every uni, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that's all the questions.
Yeah, I think that's it. So we can wrap this up now.
I'm just going to put up the QR code just for a few minutes while where is it? Just this QR code here. If you guys want to just take any pictures of that, just to sign up for the courses. If you have any questions, make sure that you message us on Instagram.
Yeah, so someone's asked about the recorded session. So the recorded session we put up on our YouTube channel, which should be done soon in the next couple of days, right?
So I'm recording this now, so I'll send that everywhere to be posted. So don't worry, you can watch this as many times as you want. Get sick of our voices. I think that's everything then. They reuse questions. No, they change them up each time. So you can't, you can't ask anyway. What's the Insta? I'll put it at the front, but it's at I want to be a dentist. Yeah. It's I want to be a dentist, all one word, and the Twitter is I study dentistry. If you want to look us up on Facebook as well, it's I want to be a dentist. How can we buy the book? It's on the website for you to buy. Again, there was a QR code on there. Any of you guys? I don't know. Was that in the beginning or the end? Yeah, so if you want to buy the book as well, if you scan that QR code as well. And Cal's just put a link in the chat as well if you want to click that link. But yeah, if you don't have any more questions, you're free to leave. If you have any more questions, we'll wait around for 5 more minutes.
Thank you guys for coming.
But thanks everyone for coming. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any
Very useful.
feedback, any messages, send us a message on Instagram, email us, anything. Just let us know. Okay, I'm gonna stop recording now as well.
Yeah.